Jodie Haydon has lifted the lid on the emotional moment she shared a teary goodbye with Anthony Albanese before he left for war-torn Ukraine. Ms. Haydon broke down as she tightly embraced her partner in Paris before the pair parted ways and Mr. Albanese set off for the country in Eastern Europe last Sunday. The 44-year-old revealed she had been preparing to say farewell to the Prime Minister all day but became overwhelmed with emotion during the final moments. She made the revelation as she opened up on her relationship with Mr. Albanese and the moment she could have lost him after he became involved in a car crash, in an interview with 7 Spotlight that will air at 7 p.m. on Sunday. "That was really hard. I'd been doing so well all day in preparation for him going," she told Spotlight. "I think it was the moment that we got down into the foyer and the team was lined up to say goodbye to him. And there were some hugs and some embraces, and we get outside and the car's waiting. And suddenly it hits me, he's going to a war zone." Ms. Haydon was left so upset she had to be comforted by nearby staffers, describing the whole ordeal as overwhelming. She confessed it was not the first time she had been left fearing for his safety after Mr. Albanese was involved in a car crash in January 2021. The then opposition leader was driving in his car when a Range Rover veered onto the wrong side of the road and collided with his vehicle on Hill Street at Marrickville, in Sydney's inner west. Mr. Albanese suffered internal and external injuries and stayed in hospital overnight before he was discharged the following day. "When I got to the accident and I saw the car before I saw Anthony. And I remember thinking at the time, this can't end well," Ms. Haydon said. "And that overwhelming sense of, what if I lose him? And I knew then that, yeah, I love him. And I love him deeply." Ms. Haydon met Mr. Albanese in Melbourne in March 2020. She said she had heard about Mr. Albanese in the newspapers and became glad after quickly learning he was the type of man portrayed on television. Ms. Haydon recalled accompanying Mr. Albanese to his trip to Paris where the Prime Minister tried to heal wounds with President Emmanuel Macron after Scott Morrison dumped the $90 billion contract to buy French-made submarines. She said she had received a very warm welcome from both Mr. Macron and his wife Brigitte, who held her hand. She made a cheeky dig at Mr. Albanese, who said he could learn a thing or two from the pair. Mr. Albanese left Paris to travel to the Ukraine with at least a dozen armed Australian Special Forces soldiers escorting him. The party's vehicle convoy carried weapons, body armor and medical provisions in case of an emergency. Ukrainian Special Forces, in full battle kit, also shadowed the Prime Minister's every move. Mr. Albanese travelled first to Bucha to pay his respects at a mass grave where 416 civilians were buried by Russian forces after being executed. Bucha is now a notorious name, local council head Tars Shaprovsky told him. "This is a very sad place. Every one of them shot. This was not collateral damage, this was intentional. One of the slaughterhouses was a summer camp. There were 4 volunteers there. They were all shot." Mr. Albanese told him, "Australia shares your desire to seek justice for these war crimes, and we will continue to do so." The grave, behind the town's Church of St. Andrews, has become a pilgrimage site for visiting dignitaries. In a chapel underneath the church, Mr. Albanese joined the congregation, lighting a candle for the victims of the massacre. Mr. Albanese travelled in an armoured landcruiser. Local traffic was blocked wherever his party went, with soldiers and police stationed along the route.